my last, I guess, main one is knowing how to do like lo-fi wireframes. So not necessarily being a designer or replacing a designer, but being able to put something together there.
Absolutely.
I use
I think
Balsamic. You
I
use
use Figma.
Figma. Doesn't
Figma is
matter.
going to have a longer learning curve. If anyone is looking at Balsamic, if you're just starting out, Balsamic's probably faster. Figma takes a little bit of time, but once you start to learn some of the tricks it has, it ends up being a pretty powerful tool. But yeah, same here. Like I am by no means a graphic designer. It's not something that comes naturally to me at all. But the reason that I bothered to learn how to create lo-fi wireframes are for a few reasons. So the practical reason is that it creates like a bridge between copy and design. So if you just hand a Google document over to a designer, they might not have the same vision for that you have about what that should be like. And as you know, as someone who identifies as a conversion copywriter, you know, everything I do is focused on getting that conversion, getting that business result. And some designers might not have the same mindset. Like they might be thinking, I want to make this as visually impressive as possible. And that sometimes can be counterproductive for your goal, which is to get the conversion. So a wireframe is essentially you're learning how to, or what you're doing is you're just laying out the page and just showing someone else, like, here's how it's supposed to flow, taking it one step past just words and a little bit closer to design. In like, I'm not using colors. Everything is white, gray, dark gray, or black.
Me too.
And you know, lo-fi, just low fidelity. You're not creating something that looks like a designer made it necessarily. But the other reason that you want to do it from a more, I guess, like selfish point of view is that you can charge more. And if you get really good at wireframing, if you get fast at it, the way like I'm starting to get really fast with Figma, it's a way to make your deliverables worth a lot more. And it sends a signal kind of that it looks like more. It's like sometimes people think like, you know, copy, words, there's some sort of block about paying a lot of money for words.
Yeah,
But when it's in this thing that's sort of like it's words plus design now, it becomes more valuable and it also just looks more valuable. And then from a design perspective, you know, you should also be able to review whatever it is that the designer has created and be able to spot any things that might be getting in the way of conversions. So again, you don't have to be a graphic designer. You don't have to take like all these courses or things like that, but you should know the basics of design. And, you know, at this point I can spot things like, okay, the way the designer did this is like, you know, this button that's really important is really buried and like hard to see here. And, you know, maybe it needs to be a higher contrast color and a bigger button, and maybe we need an arrow there. So being able to understand how the design affects the parts of it that you own, which should be in part the performance of the page or whatever, or email, whatever it is, you should be able to give constructive feedback on that. That's not to say that you're not going around pushing pixels or you know, add a drop shot, you know, whatever. Like, you're not trying to replace anyone's job. You're not trying to become a designer, but you have to be able to see how the design is going to impact performance and give feedback on that.
for sure. And the one way that I phrase it when I'm, you know, writing a proposal or having a sales conversation is by delivering it in this lo-fi wireframe, I'm speeding up that whole design and development process. And what I think this does is, in the client's mind, it allows them to think like, okay, I can borrow a little bit from what I was going to pay design and allocate it here since we're going to be saving some time. And so it does allow you to add some value because they're going to need fewer design resources in order to execute on this. So yeah, my wireframes, despite using Balsamic, very similar, black and white, no images. I always make sure to tell them that this is not meant to replace a designer. I'm
Yep.
not going to be making your typography decisions. And
Ooh.
if you have a good designer and they see what I've done and they want to make some changes, I tell them to trust their designer to do their job. But ultimately, the pages end up looking a lot more like I envisioned versus if I were to just give them a Google Doc and tell them to run wild with it. Yeah, and I guess the last piece there, and this goes back to client management, when you submit a wireframe with comments in the margins that describe, some of the key decisions that you've made, and you deliver it in a PDF, you're going to get a far fewer revisions versus that Google Doc with everyone able to comment and make suggested edits. So super important. So for
Yep.
me, that was the end of my list of like the things that are super valuable now. The one thing that I could see becoming more valuable is something that I've called in other places called like moonshot messaging, which is this idea that as categories become more crowded, which they are in B2B SaaS almost across the board, and as more companies and marketing teams and freelancers catch on to this idea of using the voice of your customer in your copy, that might not be enough anymore to stand out and be memorable. And so this idea of moonshot messaging is that you might need to take chances with your messaging, capture the essence of what your customers are saying, but do it in a way that is, maybe jarring or shocking, unexpected, memorable, sticky. So like for me, a recent example is Coda and their Enough of This sheet tagline, rather than, obviously what they're alluding to. And you can't forget it. It got shared like crazy. And as soon as you come across it, whether you're going to be a Coda customer or not, when it comes time to think about those types of tools, so Notion, Coda, etc., they're going to be in your consideration set because you will not forget them. And I think that's going to become increasingly important in the coming years.